small tops. Okay, Haribo. This is an introduction to Caitanya Caritamrta, which originally delivered as 5 morning lectures on the Caitanya Caritamrta, the authoritative biography of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami before the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, New York City, April 10 to 14, 1967. So Prabhupada was very early on presenting Caitanya Caritamrta. So here's transcriptions. I don't know if it's all the lectures. The word Chaitanya means living force. Charita means character, and Amrit means immortal. As living entities we can move, but a table cannot because it does not possess living force. Movement and activity may be considered signs of the living force. Indeed, it may be said that there can be no activity without the living force. Although the living force is present in the material condition, it is not Amrita, immortal. The word Caitanya Caritamrta then may be translated as the character of the living force in immortality. But how is this living force displayed immortality? It is not displayed by man or any other creature in the material universe, for none of us are immortal in these bodies. We possess the living force, we perform activities, and we are immortal by our nature and constitution. But the material condition into which we have been put does not allow our immortality to be displayed. It is stated in the Katha Upanishad that eternality and the living force are characteristics of both ourselves and God. Although this is true that both God and ourselves are and God, although it is true that God has no such tendency to fall down. Being all-powerful, he never comes under the control of material nature. Material nature is but one display of his inconceivable energies. An analogy will help us understand this distinction between ourselves and God. From the ground, we may see only clouds in the sky, but if we fly above the clouds, we can see the sun shining from the sky. Skyscrapers and cities seem very tiny. Similarly, from God's position, the entire material creation is insignificant. Prabhupada gave that example, looking down from the airplane, everything's so small. So just think what it's like for Krishna. The living entity is also insignificant, and his tendency is to come down from the heights where everything can be seen in perspective. God, however, does not have this tendency. The Supreme Lord is not subject to falling down into illusion, any more than the sun is subject to falling beneath the clouds. Impersonalist philosophers, Mayavadis, maintain that because we fall under the control of Maya, we have come into the material world. God must also fall under Maya's control. This is the fallacy of their philosophy. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu should therefore not be considered one of us. He is Krishna himself, the supreme living entity, and as such he never comes under the cloud of Maya. Krishna, his expansions, and even his higher devotees never fall into the clutches of illusion. Lord Chaitanya came to earth simply to preach Krishna bhakti, love of Krishna. In other words, he is Lord Krishna himself, teaching the living entities the proper way to approach Krishna. He is like a teacher who, seeing a student doing poorly, takes up a pencil and writes, saying, do like this, A, B, C. From this, one should not foolishly think that the teacher is learning his ABCs. Similarly, although Lord Chaitanya appears in the guise of a devotee, we should not foolishly think he is an ordinary human being. We should always remember that Lord Chaitanya is Krishna himself, teaching us how to become Krishna conscious. and we must study him in that light. In the Bhagavad Gita, 1866, Krishna says, "Give up all nonsense and surrender to me. I will protect you." We say, "Oh, surrender, but I have so many responsibilities." And Maya illusion says, "Don't do it, or you'll be out of my clutches. Just stay in my clutches and I'll kick you." It's a fact that we are constantly being kicked by Maya, just as a male ass is kicked in the face by the she-ass when he comes for sex. I've seen that. Similarly, cats and dogs are always fighting and whining when they have sex. Even an elephant in the jungle is caught by the use of a trained she-elephant who leads him into a pit. We should learn by observing these tricks of nature. Maya has many ways to entrap us, and her strongest shackle is the female. Of course, in actuality, we are neither male nor female, for these designations refer only to the outer dress, the body. We are all actually Krishna's servants, but in conditioned life we are shackled by iron chains in the form of beautiful women. Thus, every male is bound by sex, and therefore one who wishes to gain liberation from the material clutches must learn to control the sex urge. Unrestricted sex puts one fully in the clutches of Maya illusion. Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu officially renounced this Maya at the age of 24, although his wife was 16 and his mother 70, and he was the only male in the family. Although he was a Brahmana and was not rich, he took sannyas. He renounced order of life and thus extricated himself from family entanglement, not caring for the Maya of wife and mother. If we wish to become fully Krishna conscious, we have to give up the shackles of Maya. Or if we remain with Maya, we should live in such a way that we will not be subject to illusion, as did the many householders. That's how the many householders among Lord Chaitanya's closest devotees. They were family, they had wife and children, but they didn't get entangled. That's a devotee. You do it out of duty and love for Krishna, because the super soul is in the heart. With his followers in the renounced order, however, Lord Chaitanya was very strict. He even banished Junior Haridas, an important kirtan leader, for glancing lustfully at a young woman. The Lord told him, "You are living with me in the renounced order, and yet you are looking at a woman with lust." Other devotees of the Lord appealed to him to forgive Haridas. But he replied, "All of you can forgive him and live with him. I shall live alone." On the other hand, when the Lord learned that the wife of one of his householder devotees was pregnant, he asked that the baby be given a certain auspicious name. So while the Lord approved of householders having regulated sex, he was like a thunderbolt with those in the renounced order who tried to cheat by the method of drinking water underwater while bathing on a fast day. In other words, he tolerated no hypocrisy among his followers. From the Caitanya Caritamrta, we learn how Lord Chaitanya taught people to break the shackles of Maya and become immortal. Thus, as mentioned above, the title may be applied, properly translated as the character of the living force in immortality. The living being force is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is also the Supreme Entity. There are innumerable living entities, and all of them are individuals. This is very easy to understand. We are all individual in our thoughts and desires, and the Supreme Lord is also an individual person. He is different, though, in that he is a leader and one whom no one can excel. Among the minute living entities, one being can excel another in one capacity or another. Like each of the living entities, the Lord is an individual, but he is different in that he is the supreme individual. God is also infallible, and thus in the Bhagavad Gita he is addressed as Achyuta. which means he who never falls down. The name is appropriate because in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna falls into illusion, but Krishna does not. Krishna himself reveals his infallibility when he says to Arjuna, "When I appear in this world, I do so by my own internal potency." Thus, we should not think that Krishna is overpowered by the material potency when he is in the material world. Neither Krishna nor his incarnations ever come under the control of material nature. They are totally free. Indeed, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, one who has a godly nature is actually defined as one who is not affected by the modes of material nature, although in material nature. If even a devotee can attain the freedom, what to speak of the Supreme Lord? The real question is, how can we remain unpolluted by material contamination while in the material world? Srila Rupa Goswami explains that we can remain uncontaminated while in the world if we simply make it our ambition to serve Krishna. Wow. Just have a desire, ambition. That's what I want to do. And Krishna appreciates that. One may then justifiably ask, how can I serve? It is not simply a matter of meditation, which is just an activity of the mind, but of performing practical work for Krishna. In such work, one should leave no resource unused. Whatever is there, whatever we have, should be used for Krishna. We can use everything, typewriters, automobiles, airplanes, missiles, if we simply speak to people about Krishna consciousness. We are also rendering service. If our mind, senses, speech, money, and energies are thus engaged in the service of Krishna, then we are no longer in material nature. By virtue of spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness, we transcend the platform of material nature. It is a fact that Krishna, his expansions, and his devotees, that is, those who work for him, are not in material nature, although people with a poor fund of knowledge think they are. Caitanya Caritamrta teaches that the spirit soul is immortal and that our activities in the spiritual world are also immortal. The Mayavadis, who hold the view that the Absolute is impersonal and formless, contend that a realized soul has no need to talk. But the Vaishnavas, devotees of Krishna, contend that when one reaches a stage of realization, he really begins to talk. Previously, we only talked nonsense. Vaishnava says, now let us begin real talk. Talks of Krishna. In support of their view that the self-realized remains silent, the Mayavadis are fond of using the example of a water pot, maintaining that when the pot is not filled with water it makes a sound, but that when it is filled it makes no sound. But are we water pots? How can we be compared to them? A good analogy utilizes as many similarities between two objects as possible. A water pot is not an active living force, but we are. Ever silent meditation may be adequate for a water pot, but not for us. Indeed, when a devotee realizes how much he has to say about Krishna, 24 hours a day are not sufficient. It is the fool who is celebrated as long as he does not speak. For when he breaks his silence, his lack of knowledge is exposed. Caitanya Caritamrta shows that there are many wonderful things to discover by glorifying the Supreme. In the beginning of the Caitanya Caritamrta, Krishnadas Kaviraj writes, I offer my respects to my spiritual masters. He uses the plural here to indicate the disciplic succession. He offers obeisances not to his spiritual master alone, but to the whole parampara, the chain of disciplic succession, beginning with Lord Krishna himself. Thus, in the plural, to show the highest respect for all his predecessors' spiritual masters. After offering obeisance to the disciplic succession, the author pays to the incarnations, to the expansions of God, and to the manifestations of Krishna's internal energy. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, sometimes called Krishna Chaitanya, is the embodiment of all these. He is God, Guru, devotee, incarnation, internal energy and expansion of God. As his associate Nityananda, he is the first expansion of God. As Advaita, he is the incarnation of, as God, as Gadadhar, he is the internal potency, and as Srivas, he is the marginal living entity in the role of a devotee. Thus, Krishna should not be thought of as being alone. He should be considered as eternally existing with all his manifestations, as described by Ramanujacharya in the Vishishta Dvaita philosophy. God's energies, expansions, and incarnations are considered to be oneness in diversity. In other words, God is not separate from all these. Everything together is God. Actually, the Caitanya Caritamrta is not intended for the novice. It is for the postgraduate study of spiritual knowledge. Ideally, one begins with Bhagavad Gita and advances through Bhagavatam to the Caitanya Caritamrta. Although all these great scriptures are on the same absolute level, for the sake of comparative study, Caitanya Caritamrta is considered to be the highest platform. Every verse is perfectly composed. In the second verse of Caitanya Caritamrta, the author offers his obeisance to Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. He compares them to the sun and the moon because they dissipate the darkness of the material world. In this instance, the sun and moon have risen together. In the Western world, there are glories of God. Where the glories of Lord Chaitanya are relatively unknown, one may inquire, who is Krishna Chaitanya? The author of Caitanya Caritamrta, Krishnadas Kaviraj, answers that question in the third verse of his book. Generally, in the Upanishads, the Supreme Absolute Truth is described in an impersonal way, but the personal aspect of the Absolute Truth is mentioned in the Ishopanishad, where we find the following verse. Hiranmayena pachena satyasyapi tamukam tattvam pusham apavinu satya dharmaya drishtaye. O my Lord, sustainer of all that lives, your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence. Kindly remove that covering and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee. Ishopanishad 15. The impersonalists do not have the power to go beyond the effulgence of God and arrive at the personality of Godhead, from whom this effulgence is emanating. The Ishopanishad is the hymn to that Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is not that the impersonal Brahman is denied, it is also described, but that Brahman is revealed to be the glaring effulgence of the body of Lord Krishna. And in the Caitanya Caritamrta, we learn that Lord Chaitanya is Krishna himself. In other words, Sri Krishna Chaitanya is the basis of the impersonal Brahman, the Paramatma or Supersoul, who is present within the heart of every living entity and within every atom of the universe, is but the partial representation of Lord Chaitanya. Therefore, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, being the basis of both Brahma and the all-pervading Paramatma as well, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As such, he is full in six opulences: wealth, fame, strength, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. In short, we should know that he is Krishna, God, and that nothing is equal or greater to him. There is nothing superior to be conceived. He is the Supreme Person. Srila Rupa Goswami, a confidential devotee, taught for more than 10 days continually by Lord Chaitanya, wrote, Namo Mahavadhanaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namani Gora Tvishe Namaha. Madhya Lila 1953. I offer my respectful obeisance on the Supreme Personality, Lord Krishna Chaitanya, who is more munificent than any other avatar, even Krishna himself, because he is bestowing freely what no one else has ever given, pure love of Krishna. Lord Chaitanya's teachings begin from the point of surrender to Krishna. He does not pursue the path of karma yoga or jnana yoga or hatha yoga, but begins at the end of material existence, at the point where one gives up all material attachment. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna begins his teaching by distinguishing the soul from matter. And in the 18th chapter, he concludes at the point where the soul surrenders to him in devotion. The Mayavadi would have all talk cease there, but at that point, the real discussion only begins. As the Vedanta Sutra says in the very beginning, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now let us begin to inquire about the Supreme Absolute Truth. Rupa Goswami thus praises Lord Chaitanya as the most magnificent incarnation of God for all. For he gives the greatest gift by teaching the highest form of devotional service. In other words, he answers the most important inquiries that anyone can ask. There are different stages of devotional service and God realization. Strictly speaking, anyone who accepts the existence of God is situated in devotional service. To acknowledge that God is great is something, but not much. Lord Chaitanya, preaching as an acharya, a great teacher, taught that we can enter into a relationship with God and actually become God's friend, parent, or lover. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna showed Arjuna his universal form because Arjuna was a very dear friend. Upon seeing Krishna as the Lord of the universe, however, Arjuna asked Krishna to forgive the familiarity of his friendship. Lord Chaitanya goes beyond this point. Through Lord Chaitanya, we can become friends with Krishna, and there will be no limit to this friendship. We can become friends of Krishna not in awe or adoration, but in complete freedom. We can even relate to God as his father or mother. That is the philosophy not only of the Caitanya Caritamrta, but of Srimad Bhagavatam as well. There are no other scriptures in the world in which God is treated as the son of a devotee. Usually God is seen as the Almighty Father who supplies the demands of his sons. The great devotees, however, sometimes treat God as a son in their execution of devotional service. The son demands and the father and mother supply. And in supplying Krishna, the devotee becomes like a father or mother. Instead of taking from God, we give to God. It was in this relationship that Krishna's mother, Yasoda, told the Lord, "Here, eat this or you'll die. Eat nicely." In this way, Krishna, although the proprietor of everything, depends on the mercy of his devotees. This is a uniquely high level of friendship in which the devotee actually believes himself to be the father or mother of Krishna. However, Lord Chaitanya's greatest gift was his teaching that Krishna can be treated as one's lover. In this relationship, the Lord becomes so much attached to his devotee that he expresses his inability to reciprocate. Krishna was so obliged to the gopis, the cowherd girls of Vrindavan, that he felt unable to return their love. "I cannot repay your love," he told them. "I have no more assets to give." Devotional service on this highest, most excellent platform of love and lover and beloved, which had never been given by any previous incarnation or acharya, was given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Therefore, Krishnadas Kaviraj, quoting Srila Rupa Goswami, writes in the 4th verse of his book, Lord Chaitanya is Krishna with a yellow complexion, and he is Sachinandana, the son of Mother Sachi. He is the most charitable personality because he came to deliver Krishna Prema. unalloyed love for Krishna to everyone. May you always keep him as your lover in your heart. May you always keep him in your heart. It will be easy to understand Krishna through him. We have often heard the phrase, love of Godhead. How far this love of Godhead can actually be developed can be learned from the Vaishnava philosophy. Therefore, theoretical knowledge of the love of God can be found in many places, in many scriptures, but what that love of Godhead actually is and how it is developed can be found in Vaishnava literatures. It is the unique and highest development of love of God, which is given by Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Even in the material world, we can have a little sense of love. How is this possible? It is due to the presence of our original love for God. Whatever we find within our experience within this conditioned life is situated in the Supreme Lord, who is the ultimate source of everything. In our original relationship with the Supreme Lord, there is real love, and that love is reflected pervertedly through material conditions. Our real love is continuous and unending, but because that love is reflected pervertedly in this material world, it lacks continuity and is inebriating. Inebriating means intoxication, not seeing things as what they are. If we want real transcendental love, we have to transfer our love to the supreme lovable object, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the basic principle of Krishna consciousness. In material consciousness, we are trying to love that which is not at all lovable. We give our love to cats and dogs, running the risk that at the time of death we may think of them and consequently take birth in a family of cats and dogs. Our consciousness at the time of death determines our next life. That is one reason why the Vedic scriptures stress the chastity of women. If a woman is very much attached to her husband, at the time of death she will think of him, and in the next life she'll be promoted to a man's body. Generally, a man's life is better than a woman's because a man usually has better facilities for understanding the spiritual science. But Krishna consciousness is so nice that it makes no distinction between man and woman. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, anyone who takes shelter of me, whether a woman, Shudra, Vaishya, or someone of low birth, is sure to achieve my association. So we don't see so many women going off to the Himalayas and being a monk, maybe a few, doing that kind of yoga. But in Krishna consciousness, we often see more women than men because they have that more simplicity to accept authority. But if a woman is married to a devotee and thinks of her husband at the time of death, then he's a devotee and she'll go back to Godhead. Caitanya Mahaprabhu informed us that in every country and in every scripture there's some kind of love of Godhead, but no one knows what love of Godhead actually is. The Vedic scriptures, however, are different in that they can direct the individual to the proper way to love God. Other scriptures do not give information on how one can love God, nor do they actually define or describe what or who the Godhead actually is. Although they officially promote love of Godhead, they have no idea how to execute it. But Caitanya Mahaprabhu gives a practical demonstration of how to love God in a conjugal relationship. Taking the part of Srimati Radharani, Caitanya Mahaprabhu tried to live as Radharani loved him, tried to love Krishna as Radharani loved him. Krishna was always amazed by Radharani's love. How does Radharani give me such pleasure? He would ask. In order to study Radharani, Krishna lived in her role and tried to understand himself. This is the secret of Lord Chaitanya's incarnation. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna, but he has taken the mood and role of Radharani to show us how to love Krishna. Thus the author writes in the 5th canto, 5th verse, I offer my respectful obeisances to the Supreme Lord, who is absorbed in Radharani's thoughts. This brings up the question of who Radharani is and what Radha Krishna is. Actually, Radha Krishna is the exchange of love, but not ordinary love. Krishna has immense potencies, of which 3 are principal, the material, external, and marginal. In the internal potency, there are 3 divisions, Samvit, Ladini, and Sandini. The Ladini potency is Krishna's pleasure potency. All living entities have this pleasure-seeking potency, but for all beings are trying to have pleasure. This may be very nature of the living entity. At present, we are trying to enjoy our pleasure potency by means of the body in the material condition. By bodily contact, we are attempting to derive pleasure from material sense objects. But we should not entertain the nonsensical idea that Krishna, who is always spiritual, also tries to seek pleasure in this material plane. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes the material universe as non-permanent place full of miseries. Why then would he seek pleasure in matter? He is the super soul, the supreme spirit, and his pleasure is beyond the material conception. So I have to stop there. Time for medicine. Thank you very much if you were listening. Astasaki. I don't know what. Yana. Yudhisthira. Om Jai. Okay? So we'll continue probably tomorrow, not tonight.